I was born with pain transference. Whatever pain someone fakes in my presence, they feel for real. When a girl pretended, I pushed her and cried about how much it hurt. The next second, she was screaming as if every bone in her body had shattered. When a con artist threw herself in front of my car, wailing that her back was broken, her vertebrae instantly dislocated, paralyzing her on the asphalt. Over time, people learned to treat me with a healthy dose of fear. No one dared to fake an illness or play the victim in my vicinity, until, for the sake of a family merger, I was engaged to a brilliant, aloof maestro of surgery. At our engagement party, his little sister from med school clutched her stomach, face slick with cold sweat, as she cried in front of the city's medical elite. She clung to my fiancé's sleeve and whispered, "Julian, my stomach cancer, it's flaring up. It hurts so much.
Please save me."
The elegant ballroom fell silent. My fiancé removed his gloves. Serafina Monica is in critical condition. The engagement party will have to wait. A doctor's duty comes first. I can't just stand by while a patient suffers. The champagne flute in my hand paused midair. Turns out you're telling the truth. In that case, you can just drop dead. Your cancer cells have just metastasized. The pain has been magnified tenfold. You're going to die in agony. Julian stopped in his tracks and glared at me. Serafina, what the hell are you talking about? Monica is already so sick and you're cursing her? How can you be so vicious? The moment he finished speaking, a blood-curdling shriek ripped from Monica's throat.
Ah.
The sound was so piercing it seemed to shatter the crystal chandeliers. Monica thrashed out of Julian's arms, crashing to the floor. She curled into a ball, clutching her stomach like a boiled shrimp. Her white dress instantly soaked with sweat. She writhed on the ground, her head banging against the marble. It hurts. It hurts so much.
Somebody help me.
My stomach is exploding. My insides are on fire, she screamed, clawing at her own belly, her nails digging bloody furrows into her skin. Julian was horrified. He dropped to his knees trying to restrain her. Monica, what's wrong? Lost to the pain, Monica bit down hard on his wrist. Julian grunted in pain but refused to let her go. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing with fury. Serafina, what did you do to her? I stood my ground looking down on them. What could I do? Didn't she say she has terminal stomach cancer? This is what a flare-up looks like. Surely a great doctor like you would know that. The guests began to whisper. That girl screams. They don't sound fake. Could she really have terminal cancer? How tragic. Julian no longer had time to argue with me. Monica's eyes were rolling back. In her head, foam flecked her lips and her breathing grew ragged. Monica, hang on. I'm taking you to the hospital right now. Ignoring the bite on his wrist, I scooped her up and ran for the door. At the threshold, he turned back,
his gaze pinning me.
Serafina, if anything happens to Monica, I will make you pay. I just smiled coldly and drained my champagne. Let's be clear, Julian. You're the one who publicly abandoned me for another woman. As of now, our engagement is void. You're not breaking it off. I am. Julian froze for a second, then snarled, fine. I wouldn't want a cold-blooded woman like you anyway. And with that, he was gone. Dead silence filled the ballroom. Everyone stared at me. I set down my glass, walked onto the stage, and took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies, but the engagement party is cancelled. Please eat, drink, and enjoy the rest of the evening. It's all on my tab. Then I gathered the skirt of my gown and walked out, leaving a sea of stunned faces behind me. I knew with absolute certainty Monica was a dead woman. My power of pain transference had never once failed. If she dared to fake terminal cancer, I would make her experience it for real. Magnified by 10, Julian rushed Monica to his own hospital, City Central, straight into the emergency room. Her screams echoed through the entire He pulled some strings and ordered an emergency full-body CT scan. He stood in the control room, his eyes glued to the monitor. When the images appeared, the attending physician gasped. Dr. Barkley, this is impossible. Julian shoved the doctor aside. On the screen was a massive, irregularly bordered tumor in her stomach. But that wasn't all. Her liver, lungs, even her bones were riddled with metastatic lesions. It was real. Stage 4 stomach cancer spread throughout her entire body. Incurable. Julian's legs gave out, and he nearly collapsed. How can this be? She had a full physical just last month at this very hospital. All her markers were normal. The physician sighed. The images don't lie. With this level of metastasis, she has 3 months to live at most from the Monica's screams continued unabated. They gave her painkiller after painkiller, but even the highest dose of morphine couldn't touch the pain. She had ripped the bed sheets to shreds. Julian burst into her room, grabbing her hand. Monica, don't be afraid. I'm the best surgeon there is. I will save you. Ignoring the other doctor's advice, he scheduled an emergency surgery. He was going to open her up and cut the tumor out himself. The operating light flickered on. Julian scrubbed in, scalpel in hand. The moment he made the first incision,
He despaired.
her abdominal cavity was filled with cancerous fluid and nodules. Her stomach was a necrotic, pulpy mess. There was nothing to cut. Nowhere to start. His celebrated surgical skill was a joke. Julian's hands began to tremble and the scalpel clattered to the floor. He leaned against the operating table, buried his face in his hands, and broke down sobbing. Meanwhile, I had returned to the Vance family estate. The moment I walked in, a teacup flew past my head, shattering at my feet. My father was on the sofa, his face crimson with rage. You insolent girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? Calling off the engagement in front of all those people? What about the Barkley family's dignity? What about our family's dignity? I looked at him coldly. Julian abandoned me for another woman. Did you want me to get on my knees and beg him to stay? My father slammed his hand on the table and shot to his feet. He was a patient. Julian is a doctor. Saving lives is his duty. Not only did you show no understanding, you said those vicious things.
You will go to the hospital right now.
Apologize to Julian and apologize to that girl. I stood my ground. No. He pointed a trembling finger at me. If you don't go, you are no longer my daughter. When I still didn't move, he clutched his chest. His body swung. You're trying to kill me.
Oh.
My heart. I think I'm having a heart attack. He collapsed onto the sofa, gasping for air. My mother rushed to his side, then turned to me. Serafina, are you trying to give your father a heart attack? I looked at my father's clumsy performance and sneered. He got a full physical twice a year. His heart was as strong as an ox. And now he was pulling this stunt to make me back down. I walked over to the sofa. A heart attack? Is it? It's very painful. Are you sure you want one? My father faltered for a second, then cried out even louder. You ungrateful child. You really are giving me a heart attack. I nodded. All right. As you wish. Instantly, the color drained from my father's face. His eyes flew open, his hands clawing at his chest. His lips, once ruddy, turned a sickening shade of blue. He gasped, but no sound came out, only a rattling in his throat. He tumbled off the sofa, his body convulsing on the floor. My mother was stunned. Honey, what's wrong? Don't scare me. My father's eyes had rolled back. He was unconscious. I calmly took out my phone and dialed 911.
Yes.
Vance Estate, we have a case of acute myocardial infarction. Bring a defibrillator. Hurry. 15 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics performed CPR on the spot.
No heartbeat.
Charging clear. My father's body arched off the floor. It took 3 shocks to get a faint, thready pulse. The paramedics, sweating, loaded him onto a gurney. Family needs to come now. We could lose him any second. My mother followed, crying as she left. She shot me a look of pure terror. She had suddenly remembered my terrifying gift, my crow's beak that had followed me since childhood. The house fell silent, the maid's hidden corners, not daring to breathe. I sat on the sofa and poured myself a cup of tea, faking an illness in my presence. No one gets away with it. The tea had gone lukewarm by the time the landline rang. The sprawling Vance estate was graveyard quiet. The maids had vanished into the woodwork, terrified that a misplaced footstep or an accidental cough might be construed as faking an illness. I answered the phone on the 3rd ring. Miss Vance, the voice of Dr. Eris, our family cardiologist, was tight, strung with panic. It's your father. He survived the transport, but it's catastrophic. Massive myocardial infarction. A massive portion of his left ventricle is dead tissue. He's on a ventilator. We're prepping him for an emergency bypass, but to be frank, the damage is inexplicably severe for a man who had a flawless stress test 6 months ago. Do what you must, doctor. I replied, my voice as smooth as the porcelain cup in my hand.
Spero no pense.
I hung up. I didn't rush to the hospital. Instead, I went upstairs, took a long, hot shower, and selected a tailored charcoal suit. My father had ruled the Vance family with an iron fist, utilizing guilt, theatrical outbursts, and financial threats to keep everyone in line. He had played the failing health card one too many times. Now he would learn what it actually meant to be powerless. When I finally arrived at City Central Hospital, dawn was breaking. The sterile smell of bleach and iodine hung heavy in the air. Outside the ICU, my mother sat crumpled in a plastic chair, her designer makeup running down her face in dark, muddy tracks. When she heard the click of my heels, she looked up. Her breath hitched. The grief in her eyes was instantly eclipsed by a primal, suffocating terror. She pressed her back against the wall, her hands trembling. Serafina, she whispered, her voice cracking. Is he awake? I asked, looking through the glass. My father was a pathetic sight. Wires and tubes snaked out of his pale body, machines doing the work his ruined heart no longer could. They just took him off the sedatives, she stammered, shrinking away from me as I reached for the door handle. Serafina, please. He's your father. And I am his daughter. I'm just here to pay my respects. I stepped into the room. The rhythmic beep 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 of the heart monitor was erratic, weak. My father's eyelids fluttered open. It took him a moment to focus through the haze of painkillers, but when his gaze landed on me, the heart monitor spiked into a frantic staccato. Beep 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 beep. His eyes went wide, bulging against his sunken face. He tried to speak, but the intubation tube gagged him. I pulled up a chair and sat beside his bed, leaning in close. You survived, I murmured. A medical miracle, they're calling it. But your heart will never be the same. You'll never walk up a flight of stairs without gasping for air. You'll never be able to yell, or threaten, or throw a tantrum without risking cardiac arrest. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye, soaking into the white pillowcase. You wanted a heart attack to force me to apologize to Julian, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't negotiate with liars. From now on, you're stepping down as chairman of Vance Corporation. I am taking over. If you resist, if you try to pull another stunt, I won't call the ambulance next time. Not if you understand. He stared at me, his chest heaving against the restraints. The machine blared a warning as his blood pressure skyrocketed out of sheer panic. Slowly, agonizingly, he gave a single, jerky nod. Good. I smiled, patting his clammy hand. Rest well, father. I walked out of the ICU, feeling the invisible crown settle upon my head. On the other side of the same hospital, a completely different kind of hell was unfolding. Julian Barkley, the golden boy of the surgical ward, had not slept in 3 days. His scrubs were stained, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and sunken. He stood outside room 402, staring at the chart in his hands as if trying to decode an alien language. Inside the room, Monica was screaming. It was a wet, ragged sound, tearing through the vocal cords of a girl who had been crying for 72 hours straight. The pain transference hadn't just given her cancer, it had given her a terminal flare-up magnified by 10. The tumors were multiplying at a rate that defied biology. They were aggressively devouring her stomach lining, pressing against her spine, infiltrating her lungs. Julian. Her voice was a wet gurgle. Julian, make it stop. Please. Julian threw the chart against the wall and burst into the room. 3 nurses were already there, trying to hold Monica down as she thrashed, tearing at her 4 lines. Her skin was a horrifying shade of jaundice, stretched tight over bones that seemed to be protruding more by the hour. Push another 10 milligrams of morphine, Julian barked. Dr. Barkley, we can't, a nurse pleaded, looking terrified. Her respiration is already depressed. If we push more, she'll stop breathing entirely. The receptors are flooded. The painkillers just aren't working. Julian shoved the nurse aside, grabbing the syringe himself. I don't care. Do you want her to die in agony? He injected it directly into her port. They waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Monica's thrashing didn't cease. If anything, the pain seemed to adapt, sharpening itself. She clawed at her own stomach, her nails ripping through her hospital gown and drawing blood from her own skin. It's eating me, she sobbed, her eyes rolling in different directions, completely delirious. There's a fire. Julian, cut it out. Cut it out of me. Julian grabbed her bloody hands. Monica, listen to me. I tried. I opened you up, but it's everywhere. I can't cut it out. We're trying radiation. We're flying in experimental chemo from Switzerland. I lied. The scream tore from her throat with such force, she coughed up a splatter of black, necrotic blood onto Julian's white coat. The room went dead silent, save for the hum of the machines. Monica grabbed the lapels of Julian's coat, pulling him down to her face. Her breath smelled of decaying tissue. I lied, she hissed, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. I didn't have cancer. I forged the lab results. I paid off the tech. I couldn't stand seeing you marry her. I wanted you to pity me. I wanted you to hold me. Julian froze. His mind, trained in logic and science, short-circuited. What are you saying? Monica, the scans. The scans were clean, she shrieked, her voice dissolving into a wet cough. Until she looked at me. Serafina. She looked at me, and suddenly the fire started. She did this to me, Julian. She's a monster. She cursed me. Julian backed away, stumbling over the 4 stand. That's impossible. Cancer doesn't just appear from a curse. It's cellular mutation. It's biology. You're delirious from the pain. I was fine, Monica wailed, arching her back as another spasm of unimaginable agony ripped through her organs. I faked it. And she made it real. Julian, kill me.
Please. Just kill me.
She began to convulse. The monitors shrieked a sustained, flatline tone. Code blue. A nurse screamed, diving for the crash cart. Julian stood frozen against the wall. He watched as they ripped open Monica's gown, exposing the dark, bruised mass of her swollen abdomen. He watched as they applied the paddles. He watched her body jerk violently on the bed. Time of death, the attending physician whispered 20 minutes later, looking at his watch. 8:14 a.m. Julian slowly slid down the wall until he hit the floor. His hands, the multimillion-dollar hands that had saved countless lives, were trembling violently. Monica's confession echoed in his mind. I faked it, and she made it real. He remembered the icy calm on my face at the engagement party. He remembered my exact words. Turns out you're telling the truth. In that case, you can just drop dead. A chilling realization crept over him, freezing the blood in his veins. Serafina hadn't just abandoned them. She had executed Monica without laying a single finger on her. Over the next 2 months, I consolidated my power. Taking over Vance Corp was easier than I anticipated. The board of directors, a group of old, stubborn men who had been loyal to my father, initially tried to stonewall me. They called a meeting, intending to vote me out of the interim CEO position. I walked into the boardroom, took my seat at the head of the table, and let them speak. The ringleader, a bloated man named Harrington, stood up. Serafina, you're too young. Furthermore, the scandal with the Barkley family has caused our stock to dip. I suffer from severe chronic migraines, and the stress you're putting on this company is making my head split open. In fact, I feel a terrible migraine coming on right now just looking at your projections. I rested my chin on my hands and smiled. A terrible migraine, Mr. Harrington? Like your head is splitting open? Yes, he huffed, rubbing his temples theatrically. It's unbearable. I can barely think straight. Therefore, we move to. He didn't finish the sentence. Harrington's eyes suddenly bulged out of his skull. A scream, shrill and entirely unmasculine, ripped from his throat. He dropped his pen, clutching his head with both hands as if trying to physically hold his skull together. He crashed onto the mahogany table, knocking over water glasses, thrashing wildly. My head, he shrieked, blood vessels popping in his eyes. It's tearing apart. Oh, God. Someone make it stop. He vomited violently all over the quarterly reports. The rest of the board members shot out of their chairs, horrified. Call an ambulance, someone yelled. I didn't move. I simply watched as Harrington writhed on the floor, clawing at his scalp until his fingernails bled. It seems Mr. Harrington's condition is quite real, I said calmly over his screams. Does anyone else suffer from stress-induced illnesses regarding my leadership? A bad back, perhaps? Heart palpitations. The silence in the room was absolute, save for Harrington's agonizing groans. The 12 men stared at me, then down at the writhing man, then back at me. The rumor of what happened to my father, and the whispers of what happened to Julian's little sister, finally clicked into place in their corporate minds. They weren't dealing with a spoiled heiress. They were dealing with a force of nature. No, Miss Vance, the oldest board member whispered, slowly taking his seat. My health is perfect. Excellent, I said, opening my laptop. Then let's discuss the merger with the biotech sector. By the end of the week, Harrington had been medically retired due to a sudden, inexplicable neurological condition that caused him constant, blinding agony. My authority was absolute. Profits soared. Efficiency skyrocketed. When employees know that calling in sick with a fake flu will result in them actually aspirating fluid and burning with a 104-degree fever, productivity tends to peak. But peace is a fragile thing. Julian had not been idle. Having resigned in disgrace from City Central following his breakdown in the ore, Julian had inherited his family's massive pharmaceutical wealth. And he was using every penny of it to target me. He started buying up supply chains we relied on. He paid journalists to write hit pieces on me, calling me a Black Widow, and suggesting I had poisoned Monica and my father. The police even showed up at my estate once, acting on an anonymous tip, but of course, they found nothing. You cannot arrest someone for supernatural phenomena. Toxicology reports on Monica showed only cancer. My father's charts showed a textbook, albeit severe, heart attack. Julian was failing in the corporate and legal world. And that failure was driving him to the brink of insanity. It was a rainy Tuesday night when I received the text. I know how you do it. I have security footage from the party. I saw you slip the accelerant into Monica's glass. I'm going to the police tomorrow morning. Unless you meet me tonight. Old Port Warehouse 4. Come alone or the whole world sees the tape. I read the message and chuckled. There was no accelerant. There was no tape. It was a pathetic, desperate bluff from a broken man. But I was tired of his interference in my supply chains. It was time to amputate the rotting limb. I told my driver to take the night off. I took the keys to the Aston Martin and drove myself to the docks. Warehouse 4 was an abandoned, rusting cavern of corrugated metal, smelling of salt water and old motor oil. Rain hammered against the tin roof, creating a deafening drumbeat. I stepped inside, my heels clicking sharply against the concrete. "Julian," I called out, my voice echoing in the gloom. A floodlight snapped on, blinding me for a second. As my eyes adjusted, I saw him. Julian Barkley was a ghost of the arrogant, pristine surgeon I had once been engaged to. He was gaunt, his cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. He wore a rumpled trench coat, and his hands, once so steady, twitched nervously. Behind him, mounted on tripods, were 3 high-definition video cameras, all with their red recording lights blinking. "I didn't think you'd actually come," Julian said, his voice raspy. "I'm here to put an end to this tantrum, Julian. You're bleeding your family's trust fund dry trying to bankrupt me. Give it up." Julian laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Give it up? You killed Monica. You killed the woman I loved." "She killed herself the moment she decided to play sick," I replied coldly. "I merely obliged her. I gave her exactly what she asked for." "You admit it." Julian pointed at the cameras. "You hear that? I have you on tape. You're a witch, Serafina. A freak. But I'm a man of science. And science always finds a way to eradicate a disease." "Is that what I am? A disease?" I took a step closer. "And how do you plan to eradicate me, Julian? Going to shoot me? Stab me? That would just make you a common murder. You'd rot in prison." "No," Julian smiled. It was a terrifying, unhinged smile. "I'm going to let you murder me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, clear glass vial filled with a transparent liquid. "You see, Serafina, I've studied you. From afar. I've tracked the medical anomalies. The board member with the migraine. Your father's heart attack. Monica's cancer. It only works when someone fakes an affliction in your presence. It becomes real. But you can't control it. It's an automatic reaction, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I just watched him. "I'm going to drink this." Julian held up the vial. "It's nothing but saline solution. Harmless salt water. But I'm going to tell you it's a slow-acting, necrotic poison. I'm going to scream that you forced me to drink it. I'm going to fake the symptoms of ingesting industrial acid. I'm going to thrash and gag and play the victim, right in front of these cameras." My eyes narrowed. "Julian, you don't know what you're doing." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," he shouted over the rain. "My performance will trigger your freakish power. The saline will become acid. It will burn my throat out. I will die right here on this floor. And the cameras will capture it all. They will capture you standing over me as I melt from the inside out. They will find the residue in the glass. They will arrest you for murder. Your empire will crumble, and you will get the electric chair." He was suicidal, driven so mad by grief and a bruised ego that he was willing to sacrifice his own life just to frame me. It was tragically brilliant. "Julian, stop," I said, my voice utterly devoid of emotion. Not out of pity, but out of a morbid fascination with his stupidity. "If you fake swallowing acid, you will experience the pain multiplied by 10. You have no concept of what that feels like. It is worse than hell. For Monica," he whispered, a tear escaping his eye. Before I could say another word, he uncorked the vial, tipped his head back, and swallowed the saline solution. He threw the vial onto the concrete, shattering it. He looked into the camera, his face contorting into an expression of theatrical horror. "Serafina, why did you force me to drink that?" he yelled at the top of his lungs, grabbing his throat. "It burns. It's acid. You've poisoned me. My throat is melting." He dropped to his knees, executing his plan perfectly. He gagged, pretending to choke. I stood perfectly still, watching the exact second the universe accepted his lie. It happened instantly. The fake gagging stopped. Julian's eyes widened, locking onto mine. The theatrical expression of horror melted into genuine, unfiltered, cosmic agony. "Urk!" A sickening, sizzling sound emanated from inside his chest. Smoke, acrid, gray, and smelling of burnt meat and copper, began to billow out of his nose and mouth. "G-G-A-H-H-H-H-H." The scream was unlike anything human. It was a demonic, bubbling shriek. Julian clawed at his own neck with such ferocity that he ripped his own skin open, trying to claw the fire out of his trachea. The pain transference didn't just turn the saline into acid. It turned it into a hypercorrosive substance that defied chemistry, magnifying the destruction tenfold. Julian fell to the floor, convulsing violently. The concrete beneath his mouth began to hiss and bubble as corrosive blood and liquefied tissue spilled from his lips. He rolled onto his back, kicking his legs, staring at the ceiling as his vocal cords dissolved entirely, reducing his screams to wet, airy wheezes. I walked over to him, my heels avoiding the bubbling puddle of his own making. I stood over him, looking down into his rapidly glazing eyes. "You thought you could weaponize my truth, Julian," I said softly, the sound of the rain masking the horrific sizzling of his internal organs. "But you forgot one detail. To frame me for murder, you need evidence that I administered the poison. I never touched you. I never gave you the vial. The cameras caught you pulling it out of your own pocket and drinking it willingly." Julian's eyes, bloodshot and leaking tears of blood, twitched in realization. He had outsmarted himself. The cameras wouldn't show a murder. They would show a bizarre, inexplicable suicide. "Your sacrifice is completely meaningless," I whispered. He reached a trembling, bloody hand up toward me, a final plea for help, or perhaps a curse. I didn't step back. I just watched as the hand dropped, slapping wetly against the concrete. Julian Barkley, the brilliant, aloof maestro of surgery, exhaled a final plume of gray smoke and went entirely still. I didn't destroy the cameras. I took out my phone, dialed the police, and calmly reported that an erratic man had lured me to a warehouse and ingested an unknown substance in front of me. The investigation was swift and thoroughly confusing for the authorities. The video footage corroborated my exact story. Julian arrived, ranted crazily, pulled out a vial, drank it, and spontaneously corroded from the inside out. The toxicology report was a nightmare for the coroner. They couldn't identify the acid. It was as if it had manifested out of thin air, which, of course, it had. The media dubbed it a bizarre suicide brought on by grief-induced psychosis. The Barkley family, already reeling from the scandals, quietly faded from high society. 3 months later, I sat in my penthouse office at the apex of the Vance Corp skyscraper. The city sprawled out below me, a glittering grid of lights and oblivious lives. The door opened softly, and my new assistant, a sharp young woman named Clara, stepped in. She carried a stack of contracts. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice respectful but laced with the inherent, necessary fear that everyone now felt in my presence. "The European delegates are ready for the video conference. And I apologize, I have a bit of a scratch in my throat. I might cough during the meeting." She looked at me, terrified, waiting for my judgment. She was telling the truth. I could see the genuine flush of a mild cold on her cheeks. I smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Drink some tea with honey, Clara. It's perfectly fine to be sick, as long as it's real." "Thank you, Miss Vance," she exhaled, relief washing over her. She set the papers down and left the room. I turned back to the window, watching the rain beat against the reinforced glass. I was born with a curse, a freakish glitch in the fabric of reality. People used to call me a monster. They called me cold-blooded, vicious, a witch. But as I looked out over the empire I had built on a foundation of absolute, uncompromising truth, I realized they were wrong. I wasn't a monster. I was the cure.